Welcome, everybody. I am George. I am introducing us today. Unfortunately, we do not have a Robert on today's episode of What the Bones Say, but we got a lot to talk about tonight. Cody, you want to reel us in?
Hey, everyone. This is Cody. Today, we are going to be talking about evil campaigns here on What the Bones Say. We're going to talk about how to do it. Should you do it? Will you do it? If you have fun while you do it, what do you do then? Do you keep having fun? Or do you ruin all your friends' lives?
Yes.
'Cause evil.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Sage, this topic was your idea. Do you want to start us off on just generally being evil?
Well, first you put mayonnaise on everything.
That's disgusting. We don't do that. That's evil.
You put extra mayonnaise on Georgia's stuff.
You're right. That is horribly evil.
And as soon as you do that, you will have your campaign.
That's the most evil thing you can do.
Yes.
I like mayonnaise.
No, you don't.
Am I evil?
Yeah.
You're not evil. You're just diabolical.
You're evil.
It's a different level. You know, you're on like an evil spectrum, you know?
Diabolical.
Yeah. But I think actually talking about evil, when we're mentioning evil, I think there's different ways to look at how evil is portrayed in stories and different tropes. Because you have the stereotypical 90s, 80s villain in your cartoon that twists their mustache and they're evil for the sake of evil. And then you have evil, which is more that these people have goals in their life and are willing to do anything to accomplish that goal, even if they create atrocities in the process. And that's when we start looking at a character as more evil. So I think when we're talking about evil campaigns, we got to look at where we're talking about on that spectrum between the comically evil, where there are these villains who just twist their mustache, and the villains who don't think themselves as villains, but think themselves as they are in the right, that the ends justify the means, and sort of thing like that.
So what are some examples of these different kinds of villains?
I'd say a Skeletor is a good mustache
absolutely.
twiddling villain. He-Man, I'm gonna turn you into a pile of bones kind of villain, where they're just sitting on Skull Mountain and they're like, oh, curse you, He-Man. I think that type of villain is very much like an inconvenience more than anything else, where
Same with like Penguin from the DC universe.
Yeah, I mean, Penguin's done some pretty bad shit, man. But I mean,
He just waddles.
I'm not super in depth in DC lore. I just know every time when you see him in like old Batman movies, or a lot of the times,
like Adam West Penguin.
Yeah.
Or
the Danny DeVito one, wasn't
Danny DeVito Penguin, like strap bombs to live penguins. That's pretty heinous to me.
I still the presentation of him as a character felt very cartoony, despite the very heinous things he did. If that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, then I think on the other spectrum, you could look at Game of Thrones for a lot of great villains. You could look at Cersei Lannister. Why does she do all the horrible things she does? Well, it's out of love of her family and a desire for power. And the desire for power is actually coming from her trying to protect her family, as she was born into a normal house. Is she a good character? Is she someone who always strives to be morally on the right side of things? No. But she's one where we can look at her perspective and be like, okay, whereas Skeletor is just kind of being the villain because he is the villain. And when you sit there and listen to some of the things he does, he's just kind of silly.
Yeah, you buffoon, get me 50 cupcakes by 5 o'clock, or else Skull Mountain will take over Eternia.
Skeletor, where are you going to put those cupcakes? You have no stomach.
Bones! Bones is where I put them. Bones!
Yeah. What the Bones Say.
What the Bones Say.
Brought to you by Skeletor. Cersei's an interesting character, because I think, too, that love that she has for her family is it's really just love for herself projected on her family.
Mm.
Like, even her outlook on, like, Jamie is just her in a man's body, like, straight up from the book. Her kids, like, I think there's a line where it said if her kids had black hair, she would have killed it. Like, it's all just extension. She's like full-blown crazy narcissist nutcase.
Right. And she still has that desire throughout the whole thing to protect her family.
Yeah, misplaced or not, yeah.
Right. And I think that's when we're looking at tabletop games, that's the first step you have to do in going into an evil campaign. What are you trying to accomplish? Because if you're going for a game like Mutant and Masterminds, and you are all superheroes and supervillains, you could go with the tropiness, or you could go with the dark, and you have to figure out how you're going to play this. Are we all going to be these silly supervillains who are just trying to conquer the world because that's what we do? Or are you doing something more along the, I think, the TV show The Boys, which makes superheroes a lot more complicated, and there's a darker tone to it.
I do love The Boys. That show rules.
Yes.
Homelander is one of the most wild characters I have probably ever seen in media.
He's out there.
Yeah, his whole backstory, like, of where it just starts off as he's this chilling authoritarian. Yeah, spoiler alert heavy.
Yes.
Starts off as this chilling authoritarian, but you discover, like, way later that he's just this. He was a little boy that grew up in a laboratory and had superpowers and was tortured, basically, and like. You don't think at first you're going to ever feel sympathy for him, but they make it happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually important with villains. And when you're running a D&D campaign, I never found interest in being a villain or doing the all-villain run. I did it once, and it was a paladin who just threw great swords at people, and that was it. I tried to be evil, but it didn't feel right. And for some reason, whenever I threw a great sword, I scored a nat 20 on disadvantage. So it was just, that was what I did, but it never felt right. It just didn't have that flavor, which I think is why the first step in a game is you sit down as a group, like the players and the DM or GM or whatever you call the referee for the game, and discuss what type of goal you're going for the villain campaign. Are you going for something where these are complex characters that are going to do the wrong thing to achieve their goals? Or are you going for something more of a silly tropey type villain game?
I think a lot of it ties into the setting and defining what evil is, right? Because, like, what is evil, right? I mean, there's the evil that we talked about where it's like, I'm going to steal 50 cupcakes from you. But there's also, like, circumstantial evil where Attack on Titan, to name a show, kind of does this, where it's like, I'm going to attack your country, and you did a bunch of horrible shit to me, so I'm going to bomb the shit out of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then from a perspective that we see within that country, it's like, oh no, I'm being bombed. This is a horrible thing that's happening to me. These guys are clearly evil because I'm looking around and all my people are dead. And then they grow up and then they do the same thing to the other country. And then somebody in that other country, from their perspective, that other person is doing an evil. So there's also, like, evil in a morally gray setting where it's circumstantial and it's what's happening. And it's like, does the ends justify the means? And it brings you down this dark rabbit hole. Now, I can see that being done extremely well in a tabletop role-playing game where you're this character and you believe yourself to be the good guy, but you're really working for powers that be that are not interested in you, and you're just a pawn on this playing board.
Hauntingly reflective of the real world.
Exactly.
And I think on, like, sort of a lower scale example of this is the villain Sandman from Spider-Man. Really portrayed well, I think, in Spider-Man 3, despite some other choices made in that movie. But he's a character who.
I'm sorry.
What? I just held my breath there. That movie's beautiful.
I looked over at George, and he just gave me this side smile, and then all I could see in my head is when Spider-Man's walking down the boulevard.
Oh, and doing
the Bully Maguire.
Yeah, doing the finger guns at people and doing jazz dances.
Now, the only villainy here, Cody, is how good that was.
I mean, it's good that you have thoughts and
I mean,
opinions.
I can't.
Wow.
Damn, the perfect scene. What about like the James Franco talking to a mirror and Willem Dafoe's in a mirror?
Well, all right. Did you ask me what No, you didn't ask me what I thought the weird choices were. If you had, I would have said Topher Grace. Weird Eddie Brock. That's my opinion on that one.
But you have to say his dancing moves were pretty good because I can't dance like
Dude,
that.
I'm
I
blind
can't dance like
and
that.
I can't see that again, and I'm happy with that.
That's unfortunate. I'm sorry for you that you can't watch that again.
I could describe it to you. I'm very good at descriptions. Okay, I won't describe it to you. That face tells me everything.
I'm gonna drive home
Okay, man.
in your car.
Folks, I am inclined to say that we did not let Cody drive home after this podcast.
Whee! So what I was saying before I was rudely interrupted for my dumb opinions is that I like Sandman a lot because it highlights well this like the real grayness in our world is that like especially in American culture with capitalism, like it creates a lot of really unfortunate situations for a lot of people. And Sandman is a character whose daughter is very sick, and so like when he gets, what's the storyline? He like robs a bank or something, right? And then the bad thing happens where he turns into the Sandman.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So like it's just, you know, he is a character who is doing the wrong thing for the right reason.
He's a Robin Hood.
Yeah.
He's effectively a Robin Hood. He's stealing money for his daughter with cancer and trying to fund her treatment. But society's like, oh, no. She has to pay for that treatment. She has to have cancer because if she can't afford it, then womp womp.
And so he's essentially there. Like, this is like an interesting type of villainy where you are a villainy to the status quo.
Yeah. It's like something that I saw earlier, and it classified like extreme right as fascism and like horrible people saying racist shit. And then extreme left is people stealing shit from like
it's statism and
like
stuff like that.
Corporations and shit like that. So I think that falls into that category.
And going into how that affects a setting, because you mentioned, George, how settings definitely affect whether there's a absolute good or evil, because some settings do have that. Like traditional Dungeons and Dragons has absolute good and absolute evil. The Lord of the Rings, the Middle-earth universe has good and evil. But settings like Cyberpunk don't. And Vampire the Masquerade don't. Those settings are more character-driven. You're more looking at the difficult choices characters will make and the situations they are put into. And I think that's where you're no longer going to be looking at evil per se. You may play as a character who does diabolical stuff. You may do things that most people would not do. But I think then we're now looking into a different type of category, which we're looking at situational ethics in role-playing games. And I think that's a very important discussion to have as players to DMs, like what system are we playing and how are we going to be approaching this if you are playing as these characters?
Well, let's look at Cyberpunk, right? Because in Cyberpunk, everybody's modifying the hell out of their bodies. In that, like, what's the ethics of turning yourself into not yourself because they have, like, cyberpsychosis and different complicated things like that in Cyberpunk, where if you take your modifications a little too far, you might go cuckoo. And if you go cuckoo, then you're going to start hurting some of the people around you. So you got to think about the situational ethics.
Yeah, I agree. And this also gets into like the line between evil game and like anti-hero.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing because you were talking, Sage, you mentioned talking about like doing diabolical things, and though you're not necessarily a villain. That makes me think of the Punisher, right? Like that dude will do some fucked up things in the name of revenge, but like at the end of the day, he's still killing bad dudes.
Yeah, and then I think one of the greatest villains of all time is Silco from Arcane, and he does a lot of diabolical shit.
Yeah.
I almost cried when he died, and I got really mad about it. But the writers captured exactly how complicated of a villain he was. And I think that is something when you're in a tabletop game, you need to sit down and go, okay, is this more of the path we're taking as a group, or are we taking more of the Skeletor path?
Oh, dude. Don't cry. You're perfect. Greatest death line I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah, that scene, that hit.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it really depends on the group that you have. If you want to go down this rabbit hole in a TTRPG game, the question should be, can your group handle that kind of villain playthrough where they are doing some absolute despicable shit?
Yeah. Yeah,
and can the DM find a way, or the GM find a way, to humanize that and to ground that in a sense that, like, makes sense, which is not an easy thing to do.
Right. No, because like I think if you are a person or a group of people that are interested in playing this kind of game, you are probably I feel like this kind of game needs to be approached as like a philosophical exercise. Like I don't think a person should be, I don't know, you can do whatever you want. And like I was a kid once and I played in an evil game and we were all stupid and did like crazy things, but we're kids and we have the ability to compartmentalize in our imagination. But as adults approaching this kind of thing, I think it benefits and behooves us to approach it as like a philosophical way to play the game.
Right.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with playing the Skeletor route.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, there's a difference in difficulty between that and like Game of Thrones, like what Sage was saying, where everybody just kind of sucks and nobody's doing anything really
except
good.
my boy Samwell Tardy.
Except him and Jon Snow.
Oof.
Actually, no. Jon Snow did some bad stuff.
Jon Snow's a good character, but again, like he was put in some situations where he had to make tough choices.
Yeah, I just recalled a few of those situations. So
yeah, my boy Samwell Tardy.
Yep. Yeah, Eddard Stark he would be a good guy in that, right?
I don't know.
Ned,
he decapitated a dude for telling him the truth.
Ned lies to his wife.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
that's
true.
To keep his oath. Which I mean, it's not evil, but you're
comparatively good.
Yeah, this is like he is another like really interesting conversation about the idea of like the right thing in perspective. Because like Eddard Stark, like you said, he lies to keep his oath. Like Eddard does the wrong thing because he thinks he's doing the right thing, and that's a whole interesting like conversation to have about the idea of honor and what is honor.
Right. And so I think what I want to focus on is the term evil campaign. Each time I have heard it being referred to, it has been one game alone, and that's Dungeons and Dragons. I've never heard of an evil campaign really being mentioned in Vampire or Cyberpunk.
Oh, I've done Cyberpunk.
You've done a Cyberpunk?
I played a Cyberpunk game run by my friend Sean, and I was this character Nico, and Nico was like I poured my id into this character. The first episode of the character, first episode or session. Where am I? First session of the game. My character gets out of prison because he was like framed, and he decides he's going to start a gang, so he just invades a gang's hideout, like just guns blazing. Like from the get-go, that was an evil game. My character, like, he ends up joining the mob because he likes the daughter of a mobster, and he was like, this feels like it's going to be a good idea. And then like the mob brings him into this like kind of like where Jack Nicholson's The Joker turns into the Joker, like a catwalks and vats and stuff.
Wait until you get a load of me.
Yeah. Like in this warehouse building, and the mob has this dude on his knees, and like Nico's looking around like, what's going on? They're like, we want you to kill him so you can join the mob. And that was for this character. It became like, oh shit.
Right, but what I'm saying is that Cyberpunk already has that within its theme, that the morals are situational and sometimes non-existent in situations because some characters just are driven by their own personal goals or their own emotions. But what I'm saying is when I hear the term evil campaign, hey, we're going to run an evil campaign, usually the game system that's being involved is Dungeons and Dragons because of the alignment system.
Yeah. Well, I think that too, it's also like there is clear-cut evil in that game.
Right.
Like there are evil gods that make their followers evil inherently and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's just, I think it's an easier world where it's like pre-built in.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. It's when you start getting into other settings, it's evil is a circumstantial, weird, vague thing where it's like, what is evil?
Yeah, and in Shadowrun, you're playing criminals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like I guess like Cyberpunk almost has this like inherent thing where, you know, the people that you think are good are actually the evil ones too. I guess that's kind of part of that world.
Right. And I think evil becomes like there are horrible things that are done that we consider evil, right?
Yeah.
But then the complicated situations that people get put into blur the lines of what we find ethical or non-ethical. But where like I'm like with D&D, like if you were to run a evil campaign, it means the characters are electing to follow evil deities or do evil things. And I think when that happens, you are taking a world of absolutes and choosing the side of evil. And I think that puts players and GMs into an interesting position that can become very difficult. For example, if not done correctly, you can either really upset the table because you go too deep into one way, or it just becomes a chaos murder hobo campaign where people are just going around killing things because they can or causing chaos. And then it doesn't really feel like you're doing evil for the sake of evil. You just seem to be chaotic just because. So like when you're in a situation where there are absolutes, how do you think you should deal with evil? Like what process should you do? Should you make it by abolishing the alignment system, or should you do something more along the lines of, well, there's the alignment, you're all evil, but let's see if there's a chance for redemption? Or like what do you think the process for that would be?
I don't think there's a wrong answer, to tell you the truth. I think you can do it either way in a Dungeons and Dragons game with, you know, alignments or without alignments. Without alignments, you're going to make it a hell of a lot easier. Personally, I don't run my D&D games with alignments as is just because I think they're stupid, but that doesn't mean that they're not stupid for somebody else. And it could definitely work for somebody else where they're like, hey, I want to run a on alignment evil game where there's opportunities to become good, and maybe there's opportunities not to become good. Maybe there's opportunities to double down on what they got and to continue and make it interesting, and you can explore the moral ethics of what they're doing, and if the characters try to justify it, then that's how the characters justify it.
So let's dive into why you think alignment is goofy. I'm just curious to like get your perspective.
Sure. So I don't like alignment very much because I don't think it's very reflective of our world. And I mean, somebody listening to this will go, well, George, yeah, duh, it's not reflective of our world. This is a fantasy setting. Well, I kind of like my fantasy settings personally when I go and run something to feel that connection to our world, and just having an alignment feels that it dulls things down and makes, to me, it feels like a restriction. Because, for example, it's like if you want to use this weapon, you have to be chaotic good. Well, what if some jerk got a hold of it? You know, can he just not use it? Like, what's stopping him from like bonking you with this warhammer? Like, just be like, oh, you can't bonk him with that warhammer because you're not a good guy. Well, it's a warhammer and it's right there, and I sure as hell can pick it up and hit you with it. It's just like I don't like it very much, and I don't like what it imposes, but what it can impose on other people can be good potentially. I've been in D&D games where DMs have incorporated alignment fairly good. SH has done it before, and he's done a good job with it. Just personally for me as a DM or a GM, I just don't like to dabble with it.
I think with the alignment can become a trap because if you keep to the idea that rather than this being the beginning of a character's moral code, right? If you're playing lawful good, it means that you try to abide by the laws, and you do so through an ethical process, right? You are always trying to do things through the law to help people, to protect people, to make sure everyone's cared and well fed. And if a game master and a player don't see eye to eye, that where a player wants to have a shift and a game master's like, no, that's your alignment, that's how you have to act, it becomes a role play restrictive, as well as it causes conflict at the table, because one character could be doing the shift towards a villain, while the GM is under the impression it's like, no, there's no shifting.
Yeah.
Which is why I think in Dungeons and Dragons, we're talking more of like when the alignment system, I think alignment system started coming into play with lawful good and stuff, 2nd edition. Because 1st edition in old school essentials were lawful, chaos, and neutral or balance. So that you didn't have the idea of good, evil, and neutrality. But I just think if you make alignment more into this grand scope of what a person can do, right? You could start as lawful good and then realize that the laws of civilization bind you to things that are unethical, and you could become chaotic good, right? It doesn't mean that you have to act that way. It just shows the progression of your character. Or you could be a neutral good hero and you fall into these dark things trying to do the right thing, and you slowly shift towards evil. And I think that's where like the evil campaign comes in, when all your characters are starting out as evil in games that do not have the basis right away that there is no absolute good and evil.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, like the way that, like, I think this is just like alignments are boxes, and boxes are great for some and not so great for others. Because, like, I mean, like, think about what the box of alignment would be like. Like, what am I trying to say? Another, like, it's like an interesting way to view perspective, because lawful good, right? Like, a lawful good person from like a place in our world where there's free healthcare comes here. Like, what are they gonna do? You know what I mean? Like, you now have to ingrain yourself in this system that goes against your moral compass in order just to get cared for.
You're talking about the average European experience.
Yeah.
Continue.
I'm sorry. I'm
sorry, I had to do that.
I'm an ignorant plebeian. What do you want? It's like an interesting thing to me, like how confining the alignments can be, I guess. Because, like, you know, like, what do you do if you're a lawful good, like, person, like a barbarian who's like from a tribe, and you follow your code and you follow that law that you have to the letter? Maybe a barbarian's a bad choice. Can't they, like, not be lawful? Isn't that like part of their
You see, that's why I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's like why I don't like imposing those restrictions. I'm like, whatever your character is whatever your character is. We're not going to define it as something. If your character does something shitty, that probably means your character is shitty. If your character does something good, then your character's probably somebody good. But that's not how the world usually works. People are more complicated than that. You can do something shitty and still be a good person, and vice versa. You can be a shitty person and you can do a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think we should round sort of the philosophical discussion of an evil campaign up, and then now we should move on to executing it.
Yes.
Unless anyone has some thoughts they want to round up here.
No, I think that the last thing I would say is that the first thing that is very important is you always sit down as a group and discuss what your goal is for the campaign. My brother right now is designing an evil campaign, and his idea is really cool. He set it in the 9 Hells. And it's a good setting for it because of how it encompasses all the characters and how it will challenge them in different ways. But I definitely think it's just like a good thought-provoking thing is if you're going towards more of a evil, or I would say now we've come to the conclusion of a morally gray story, you do need to sit down and have a conversation with your table before approaching the execution.
Yeah, very true. So with that in mind, what are some ways an evil campaign could start?
Oh, on a battlefield.
Okay.
And the reason I say on a battlefield is because war is one of the most gruesome things in human history. It is basically everything we find to be vile and evil wrapped up into one, while also having companionship and stuff like that. And when you may not like someone who's next to you under the same banner, if you start a campaign, for example, you are under a lord and you're all knights, and your kingdom has been known to do horrible things, and your battalion of knights or your squad, what's the word? Your section of knights gets surrounded and you're dying. It's a great way to bind all the characters together because they have to fight out to survive or flee or desert. And then they have a means of coming together. Like you now, even if they're all having different goals to try and rise in the ranks of the kingdom or conquer the world, or you can't get this powerful artifact to dominate someone.
Yeah, I think we can call them a murder of knights in an evil game.
Right. Like you would, or a murder of mercenaries.
Yeah.
Or, it's just like you would set a really cool boundary where these people now have an alliance, but they don't necessarily have to like each other or work together. They just have a common goal for the moment.
What about you, George? How would you start an evil game?
That's a good question. Can I give an example of something that's a start to an evil game that I really like?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
You have been denied.
So in Baldur's Gate 3, spoilers, there is something called a Dark Urge playthrough, which doesn't necessarily have to be an evil playthrough. And in video games, playing evil 9 times out of 10 is boring. There's a million videos that have talked about why playing evil in video games can be boring. I'm not going to talk about that here, but I'm going to talk about this game and why playing evil in Baldur's Gate 3 is fun. So you start off as a amnesiac if you play Dark Urge playthrough, and you're like, I can't remember anything except that I want to murder everything is the only memory that I have. That's my only urge, is that I want to kill shit. And the player can try to rationalize this or go about it in whatever way that they want as you're stuck on this squid ship and you crash. And now you are waking up in the middle of the night and you are killing people. Do you give in to those urges and do you continue to do that kind of thing? Like, how do you justify doing that? You're not cognizant that you're doing it. And it enters a very interesting moral quandary that I really personally enjoy, that I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 did very well. So, yeah.
What about you, Cody? How would you start it?
So I like the idea of, I guess, evil by perspective. I say perspective a lot today in this episode, friends. That's the word of the day. Haha. So you have a party of evil characters, and what do these guys like to do other than their evil shit that they do all the time? Now, what happens if the world ends? They can no longer do the evil shit that they like to do. So if I was to start an evil campaign, I would want to start it with an existential threat that's just more evil than the evil guys. And like see how those evil characters deal with that situation. What evil shit they decide to do to stop the existential threat that's going to end the world. And like, I don't know, maybe there's a redemption arc in there for those characters. Maybe they have some self-discoveries and character development and find their way to being maybe not good guys, but better. Or maybe they just relish in doing the evil thing and they kill the evil guy, just sheer evil power.
You want to know what you're describing?
What?
A Sabbat Chronicle, potentially. So in Vampire, there's the Sabbat, which are evil, or not evil. It's how you want to quantify it. They don't have to be evil, but
not usually morally right.
They're not usually what society deems to be morally correct. But in in vampire society, maybe they might be right because the Camarilla kind of sucks and they want to be away from them. But the Sabbat are lurking around and they're like, "Hey, we're Sabbat. We believe in freedom, even if that means the subjugation or horrible things happening to humans or anybody else. We just believe in pure vampire freedom from the antediluvians. And that's a Sabbat. Now, what you describe, Cody, is like what is considered normally a bad guy, which is a Sabbat, fighting a worse guy. That happens in a lot of Sabbat chronicles against a clan called the Bali that some people do. The Bali is this clan in Vampire that are infernalists. They worship devils, and devils in the world of darkness are pretty bad. They're worse than devils in like D&D. I'm sure you know what devils are in World Darkness,
bad.
Cody. You're a World Darkness veteran.
They haven't done that horrible things, right?
But like the Bali are like taking mass amounts of people and doing horrible things to try to summon demon lords and bring them to the world. Now, that's a perfect Sabbat playthrough because the Sabbat will look at that and say, no, I don't want to be controlled by a demon, or I don't want to be controlled by any of these things. That goes against my philosophy of being controlled. I want to be free at all costs, even if that hurts other people. And the Bali are kind of on a certain end of it, and they're like, we want to bring our eldritch gods into these worlds, and then they clash, and the Sabbat kill them, and yay.
Yeah.
Are the Sabbat better by the end of it? No. It's questionable, but I mean, did they stop the bad guy? Or what is deemed to be the bad guy that would get everybody killed and destroy the world? Yeah.
Like, I was just going to say, like, because, like, you got to remember, like, villains have agendas. That's like part of being a villain is you have, like, you know, to be truly villainous, you're pursuing something and you're doing villainous shit to get there generally. Unless you're like a Joker who kind of rides the line between having a goal in mind and just kind of for the lulz.
Joker's Joker.
Yeah, Joker be joking. But, like, a villain's going to have an agenda, it has a plan, has a goal, and what's going to fuck that goddamn goal up other than the world not being there tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're really going to write a villain as your character, and even game masters and referees, you should take notes on, like, writing a good villain. The villain that is complicated always sees themselves as morally right. They will not view themselves as doing the wrong thing, or they're doing the wrong thing, unless they're like a psychopath, a sociopath who like to do the wrong thing, and they know that it's the wrong thing, but they like to do it, or they get joy from it, and then you have a different type of villain. But I was kind of listening to the Sabbat and the Infernalist, and I had just this thought to start a different campaign that's not like fantasy on a battlefield or kind of like with magic, but if you wanted to more like cyberpunk or more of a lower start, because I like to put my characters in immediate res. I know some people like to do the tavern thing where everyone meets in a tavern. I like to do something where it's happening in the moment and it's part of the grand story, because then the players immediately get into it.
Wow, look at you trying. What are you, a guy that puts effort into things? Like a guy that tries?
No.
Nerd.
Oh.
Look at the nerd. Look at him try.
I'm your right homie. Remember that?
I'm sorry, Daddy.
Whoa.
Sorry.
Hold on. But I was thinking...
He's my dad.
No. I was thinking a really great way to introduce, like, villains of a different type. Like, you could have a bunch of different types of villains, is either in a corporate setting, right, where these people are like trying to vie for corporate power, and they take different means to get that power, blackmailing, murder, you name it, the whole kit caboodle.
We're going to be meeting some of those in an upcoming Bonesode.
Yes. Be prepared. But you can either have that, or you set it in a political situation. For example, there's an audience before a king, right? And then the king demands one of the characters takes the head of someone because he was offended by them. And you already set the situation. You know, you set a lot of political tensions. And if it's a villain character, they're going to go through with it. If the villain character decides they don't want to go through with it, they may try to manipulate the situation in their favor. Like, let me do the execution in private. And then they try to use that person and say, you owe me a life. And then you create that story right from that moment and allow the characters to drive to the next scene.
Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Well done. Well done.
So we've talked a lot about evil, and it's put a poor taste in my human oath of devotion mouth.
Yeah, we have a human paladin here.
Yes. And, I think one of the things in evil campaign, or a morally gray campaign, the one thing you should always have are the moments of good. Because, and I think this is very important, when a character that we see as an antagonist or a villain who's done horrible things does something good because it relates to their backstory or relates to something that is very personal to them. Right? Like, kind of like Silco.
Mm-hmm.
Does he raise Jinx in the right way?
Questionable.
Questionable. Probably not. I don't think so. Does he love her? Yes. Does he do a lot of the things because he loves her? Yes. It's like he does some good, He does some weird good that has maybe some tinge to his own plan, but he does still do good. And I think that's very important, is that if you want to have moments where people can connect, like the players themselves can connect with their villain in a way that, like, whoa, maybe in a different life he would have done different choices. Maybe there was a blink of hope, or yeah, I can see why he went down this path. He lost himself, but there's still some light in this human, and it makes that more complex villain.
Well, and I think this is like maybe a good way to wrap it up. So what have we been going for, like an hour?
41 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
but I think evil for the sake of evil is fun to watch at times. It's cartoonish. It can be bombastic. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a boring concept. Like, there's not a lot to be said or to be gained or to even be explored in the idea of evil for the sake of evil. Because all that is just, it's just childish id let off the leash. Like, it's all me. Like I think like what Sage is really painting a good picture of is, like, evil is complicated. Because life is complicated, right? Like, we go through our everyday lives just doing the best we can, and we don't get to know if any of the actions that we have made, like, what effect those have on other people. Like, I don't know. Like, you could be at a grocery store and just you stop in front of someone, and someone could take that so personally and walk away with the rest of their day ruined, and we never know. We never get the chance to apologize, but we played the villain in someone's goddamn grunt. They just wanted milk.
Yeah, so I think that would be more along the lines of like evil. I think there's things we can all agree on that we deem as evil, right? But I think what happens is when we're talking about evil or making an antagonist a villain, because if you don't have absolutes, you don't have good and evil. You have grays, and you have people who strive to do the right thing. You have people who are desperate, and then you have people who don't give a shit and only care about themselves, right? So then it becomes more complex with how those people react to situations, which is why, like, Dead Men Walking and other games that drive into that make really good stories, because you're looking at that exploration. But what I would say is that when you're looking at evil actions, right, when a character or even an NPC takes that evil action, there is a reason to that evil action, right? It could be that their whole thing, right, the reason they took out an entire village is because that village murdered his mother and called his mother a witch. So what did he do? I will take vengeance and write them off because they are scourge of the earth. Was that the right thing to do? No. Does it have a connection to the character's story and have an emotional drive that people can relate to? Yes. Right?
Well, that makes me think of, I think it's Star Wars Episode 2, where Anakin takes out the Sand People village. It's all just, he was so heartbroken about his dang mama. And did he do the right thing? No. But, like, I don't know.
I hate them. I slaughter them like animals.
I'm in agony. I just remember that line.
And then Natalie Portman, Padme, just looking at him like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. I love you.
I think we can agree that the writing of that dialogue was evil.
Yeah, I mean, the writing of George Lucas, you're not going to hear this. I know you're not going to hear this. But if there is a chance that this reaches your ears, bad boy. Very bad boy. You did a bad thing. Put your nose in it. You did a bad boy job.
No, look.
What have you done? What have you done?
The Star Wars fans are going to find you, and they're going to hurt you now, Cody.
Dude, I have a Millennium Falcon belt buckle, and I love Star Wars with all of my heart.
Nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans.
Yeah, but George Lucas,
Yeah.
let people say no to you, George. Let people say no. It could be cooler. It'll make you a better person.
I'm.
We can edit this out.
No, I just don't know how to feel about this.
It could have been better.
Yeah, and I think if we're done, I think the last thing I'll say is that when you're exploring storytelling and you're doing collaborative storytelling, you are entering a world of human. You're entering a very human world. No matter what fantastical creatures or aliens or whatever you have, your stories are going to have human elements. And you're going to be exploring the good of humanity, right? The things that we do that make our worlds better. And on a daily life, you see people smiling because of actions, and you're going to also see the darker sides of humanity. And there's a lot of philosophy that goes into it. So viewers and listeners out there, when you are exploring these worlds, always make sure to just kind of take a moment back as you write these characters and just breathe, because you're going to be entering some worlds that are, kind of dark, and you're going to have light in all those darknesses. So
yeah, remember, without good, there is no evil, but without evil, there is no good.
Yep. But more importantly, remember, what do the bones say?
Oh, it's bad.
okay, I thought we were doing that. Oh,
Bad boy.
I thought we were doing that together, but I will excuse myself.
The bones say George Lucas is bad.
No, we don't. We don't say that. No, we don't.
Who's the villain here now, boys?
Have a
I
wonderful
like
night.
George.
Have a wonderful night, folks, and we
Okay.
will see you on the next episode of What the Bones Say.
Bones.